All right, I'm ready now. Are you? Any other questions before we get started?
No, good.
Sorry, you have to sit through this. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
All right, let's do it. What's up, UX fam? How's your mom and them? Welcome to another episode of Beyond UX Design. I'm Jeremy. If you're new here, welcome to the show. I am super stoked to have you. And before we jump into the episode today, I wanted to give another book feedback shout out. Shout out to Zoe for leaving me some awesome feedback for the Beyond UX Design book. Don't forget, if you get the book from beyonduxdesign.com/book and you leave some honest feedback, you'll get a chance to win a shout out on the show like this one, a badass holographic Beyond UX Design sticker, a free book, or even a chance to have a one-on-one with me. So head on over to beyonduxdesign.com/book and pre-order your copy today. And if you haven't done it already, please consider subscribing to the show wherever you listen to podcasts. And if you are regular here and you feel like you're getting something out of the show, I would really appreciate you leaving a 5-star review. That'll help me out so much more than you can imagine. And as always, thanks so much to Chris, Siraquan, Stacy, Radu, Megan, Andrew, John, Mark, and Kevin for all their support. And if you want to join those fine folks and help keep the show independent and ad-free, you can become a patron for as little as $3 a month. That is less than $1 an episode. And if you do that, you'll get some sweet, sweet perks for your support. And of course, if you think the show is worth sharing, then I would love it if you told your mom and them about it. And for more information about how you can support the show and help more people find out about what we're doing here, make sure to check out beyonduxdesign.com/support. This week's episode is brought to you by Mento Design Academy, where it's not just about learning UX design, it's about discovering your unique path in it. And their approach is different. It's personal. It's tailored to you. They don't just teach, they inspire students to use their passion as a driving force in their learning, and that is something that I've experienced firsthand as a mentor. I've been fortunate enough to guide students who are exploring concepts that they're truly passionate about. It's not just about following a curriculum, it's about shaping that curriculum around what excites each student. And this approach emphasizes not just knowledge, but a deep love for the discipline and seeing my mentees grow and apply their passions and craft portfolios that are genuinely them. It's been one of the most rewarding experiences of my career. So if you're looking for a UX course that's as unique as you are, check out Mento Design Academy. Head on over to beyonduxdesign.com/mento. And just for my listeners, use the promo code BeyondUX200 to get $200 off their course. So join Mento and let your passions lead your learning journey. This week's audiobook recommendation is Thinking Fast and Slow by Daniel Kahneman. Thinking Fast and Slow breaks down our thinking into two different types, that fast, intuitive type thinking and the slower, more logical thinking. And Kahneman explains how these thinking styles influence our choices and can sometimes lead to mistakes and all those biases that we talk about. And the book provides invaluable insights into how our minds work, offering a deeper understanding of the processes behind decision-making and judgment. It's an essential read for anybody, especially UX designers who are interested in the cognitive processes that underline human behavior and decision-making. It's a really great book. You definitely need to read it. So head on over to beyonduxdesign.com/audible trial to start your free trial and download Thinking Fast and Slow completely free and help support the show in the process. Well, I am excited to have my guest, Melissa Gallagher, on today. Melissa Gallagher is going to talk to us about UX audits, which the word audit itself kind of, I think, gets a lot of people nervous. You know, we think about the IRS coming to get me or something like that. But UX audits are a critical piece of making sure that your software is usable and user-friendly and all that stuff. So we're going to talk to Melissa today about that. I can't wait to talk to her about it. With a specialized focus on conducting comprehensive UX audits, Melissa excels at effectively communicating her findings to stakeholders. And for her, the user isn't just a consideration, it's the core of her design philosophy. Guided by user insights, Melissa crafts informed recommendations that not only enhance a product's user experience, but also align with the business goals, which is also very important. A staunch advocate for accessibility, Melissa's commitment permeates every step of her design process. She's on a continuous journey of learning and is always eager to share her rich knowledge with others, which is exactly what she's doing today on the show. Melissa, welcome to Beyond UX Design. I am so excited to have you, and I'm excited to talk about UX audits today. How's it going?
Awesome. That's a great intro. I'm excited to be here too. Thanks for having me.
You like that? ChatGPT wrote that, by the way.
Oh my God. That thing is getting better every day.
Saves me so much time. I tell you what, I don't like to use it for user research. I wouldn't use it for UX audit, obviously. But I tell you what, it's great to write a bio.
That's right.
Just plug in some data and there it goes.
So flowery.
Cool. So Melissa, welcome to the show. I'm really excited. We're going to talk about UX audits today. And I think your company, Headway's got a unique approach to that. So we're going to talk about that. Before we do that, I want to know about you. Tell me a little bit about your background. And then ultimately, how'd you get so passionate about UX audits? I'd love to hear it.
Yeah, well, I am a trained graphic designer. That's where I started. I went to traditional graphic design school, worked in marketing as an in-house designer. I've done print, I've done digital. And it wasn't until kind of later on that I had the opportunity to help kind of design an app at a previous employer that I was kind of bitten by the UX UI bug and have kind of continued on in that path. And so, yeah, started cutting my teeth and learning all things UX, UI related and product design related and sort of steered my career more towards kind of crafting and designing software rather than kind of marketing focused. And that's kind of led me here to where I work now, Headway. It's an agency based in Wisconsin where we help founders kind of bring their products to market, as well as helping enterprise level companies with their digital products and helping them optimize. And what I found in that process is that a lot of it is just evaluating the state of the world and needing to communicate that to stakeholders of just like, here's where we're at. Here's what you actually need, right? I found that versus marketing at my time, we're starting at zero, right? We got to brainstorm. We have to create something out of what feels like nothing versus as we've switched to product. It's less about starting at zero and more like, how do we optimize, right? How do we make this better for people? And how do we make the business better in that process? And there's a lot of fires in the iron, right? Lots of things are happening. A lot of people are involved in like decision making. They have their kind of dogs in this. So it's like, how do we make sure everyone's happy from a business perspective? How do we make sure the users are being heard and are advocated for? That's where this process has come in, right? It's all about developing a process that's repeatable so that you can communicate that to folks.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, that's a really great comparison between advertising and software in general, right? It's advertising. You start with a clean slate every time, a brand new thing. Maybe there's an existing brand or something, but you're building something from nothing, like you said, versus a product that exists and we are continuously improving it over time, adding new features, expanding all that stuff. And very rarely are we really starting from the very beginning in software and UX design. That's a really great call out. Yeah, and the interesting thing too with audits, you mentioned this a little bit, but coming in and this is the state of the world. This is the state of your business, the state of your software, the state of your product, versus having to sell something constantly, sell an idea. This is just like, this is how it is. This is the heuristics. We found this. And now you gotta figure out what to do. So that's really cool. So I'm curious, like UX audits, and you mentioned coming in and doing these. Why are people doing UX audits? Why do people need to do UX audits if they aren't doing them today? A lot of people probably aren't.
Yeah, they are. And a lot of it is the intimidation factor, like you mentioned at the top, like audit, that's a scary word. And we've tried to find other words like evaluation or something like that. But the SEO gods really love audit.
Yeah,
so we keep using it. I think people are skipping it, mainly low UX maturity, right? Might not have the language or tools or processes developed to really evaluate things. A lot of times in bigger organizations, things are siloed, right? So features are getting designed and developed by different teams and then it kind of comes packaged together. So we don't really have a holistic view of what the product looks like and how things interact. But we know something's wrong, right? We have metrics that aren't being hit. We have some customer service tickets coming in. And sometimes instead of pausing, evaluating, seeing what's going on, we have to keep going. We have to, there's not a lot of time, not a lot of folks. We kind of just plow ahead and hoping that in that process, things get resolved. It's a real luxury to take a pause, right? It feels like deadlines are
Oh,
always
yeah.
looming. And it's hard to sell. Hard to sell.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, that's the interesting thing you mentioned, that it's a luxury, because often teams feel like they can't slow down,
Mhm.
and it's funny, I've heard this a lot more recently, but this idea of slowing down to go fast. People want to go fast, 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 and they end up going much slower because they didn't take a minute to step back. So you mentioned something about metrics or I can't remember the exact word you used, something about measuring and stuff like that. I want to talk about that in a second. But before we do that, I want to talk about like what a UX audit actually is.
Right.
And what are you actually doing when you go in there to do a UX audit? And I don't want to talk specifically about Headway necessarily. Anybody out there who wants to go do a UX audit, what is the process? What are you actually doing when you get in there to do an audit?
Right. So it all starts with meeting with your stakeholders, right? What is their goal? What is their understanding of the problem? So that's kind of the start of the process. Understanding, like I mentioned, the state of the world. What is everyone's understanding of things that are going on? What do they think the resolution is? Because oftentimes there's already a few solutions that have been pitched, and maybe there's not a clear path forward, right? There's kind of some politicking happening, and we're at a standstill on where to go forward. So understanding that is your first step in the process before you even touch the tools, right? And understanding, who is this for? Who is your target audience? Because once you understand that, everything else kind of falls into place. And that's critical.
You just said a few things, and it makes me realize, like, I think we jumped ahead, because the idea, though, is that you're there to investigate why something's wrong, right? But in order to understand that something is wrong, generally, you have to have some measure to know whether or not something is effective or failing or successful. And so I said we were going to talk about measuring and things like that in a second, but maybe it's better to talk about that before we talk about the audit, because it's one of those things where I feel like you do the audit, right? Correct me if I'm wrong. You do the audit because there's a problem, and your job as the auditor, is that the right word? I hope
We'll
you
go
don't
with
come in.
that.
Hi,
We'll
I'm
go
the
with
auditor. That is probably maybe worse than audit. Having an auditor, being an auditor. But yeah, that idea though is that there is something wrong, and we're coming in to look at everything, to understand, take an audit of what is there, and then go back and say, these are why we think something is failing. But in order for that to happen, right, that idea of metrics, OKRs, KPIs, whatever tool your company uses, your team uses, maybe let's talk about that first, actually, because that sounds like it may be the impetus for even having this process kick off in the first place. Is that accurate?
Yeah. I mean, sometimes we come in and the decision has been made already to redesign an app or a website. So
Interesting.
what stays, what goes? Why should we not bring this into our fresh new design? How do we decide, is this still we don't want to bring the same problems anymore into this new design. So a lot of that is that's kind of where it starts, of just like evaluating, what do we want to change? What is still working? Because sometimes it's not always all bad, right? Sometimes we learn things that, actually, this thing that we thought that folks didn't like, they actually really like it. We need to lean into this a little bit more. So it all starts with, like, are we even measuring anything, first of all? Because sometimes that's even the thing of just
how often are people like not even checking a thing? They don't even know. I hate to use like bounce rate, obviously is not a very good metric, but bounce rate, for instance, like if you don't know that people are getting to your page and then quickly leaving, then how do you even know that you need to go in and fix something?
right.
If you're not even checking those things. Obviously, there's better metrics than bounce rate, but that's just like a silly example. But, if you aren't measuring, you aren't tracking, and that isn't something that you've established from the beginning, right? And that's something I think a lot of teams, because they're moving so fast, that metrics, that really putting a lot of deep thought into objectives, into key results to know if we're going to hit those objectives, the metrics to use to measure the things. That's a lot of effort. And often it requires tools, Amplitude or like any other number of tools that are not cheap. Google Analytics does some, but not very well, I don't think, for software. So, maybe that's something you could speak to when we get there, because there's a piece of this too that I want to talk about in a minute, which is after we've done the audit, implemented the changes, then measuring to make sure that it was successful. But, again, it's just this idea that teams are just going so fast that they stop. They never take a minute to stop and think about the direction they're going,
Right.
And so anyway, I find that really fascinating. So we established the metrics, the objectives, key results, KPIs, whatever you want to call them, whatever tool your team uses. You've established that you've found a problem. Now we've hired a team, we have a consultant, or maybe my internal team is going to do this UX audit. The purpose of an audit is to obviously uncover what's wrong, right? And then go from there. So when you are trying to sell this to a stakeholder or somebody, you mentioned low maturity, you might get pushback when you say, I want to do an audit or I want to uncover this. So how do you sell that idea of a UX audit to a stakeholder or someone who may actually be somewhat unreceptive to the idea?
Oh, that's a great question. I think I would say, to use an analogy of just your car, for example.
I love analogies.
Good, because that's the best way I can explain things to stakeholders is like, let's talk about a real world thing, right? If you take your car to the mechanic and you just say, hey, fix it. I can't guarantee whatever it is that you think is wrong will get fixed. Someone's got to go under the hood, lift it up, take a look. Maybe they have to drive it down the street and back to actually understand, like, okay, here's what needs to get fixed. And a lot of times I think stakeholders are, in my opinion, kind of scared, again, like the car thing, that you're going to find too much, right? As someone coming in outside, we're kind of looking at your dirty laundry. And so we want to make sure that, like, we're going to give you recommendations and a timeline for how to fix things. But at the end of the day, that's up to you. And so kind of inspiring that confidence of, hey, we might find 100 things wrong. Truly, you might only have time to fix 5 of those things.
Right. It's a great point. Yeah.
Right. And that usually helps inspire confidence of like, okay, it can be overwhelming if you come out of the audit and it's like, everything's wrong. The house is on fire. We have a million things that we need to fix. But taking that extra step of saying, hey, we're going to find things. You're not going to have time to fix them. We're going to help you prioritize what's important based on those metrics that we established before. And that's how you get buy-in of like, hey, you want to, I don't know, you want more people to subscribe to your newsletter? Great. When I'm going through the audit, I'm going to make sure that that's front and center. That's going to be part of my recommendation of, you said this is important to you? Those dots aren't connected in the interface.
Yeah, it's something that I think about a lot too, and this goes back to the classic. Everyone says that UX designers need to understand business. Understand business. You need to have a business acumen or whatever the people say, right? And it's interesting because this goes back to this idea that I've been trying to promote, which is you don't need to understand business. You need to understand your business. You need to understand what your business cares about. And when we talk about metrics and KPIs, it's not just click rate, bounce rate, sign up rate. It's what is the business value? And is that translating to the software?
Right.
Is the software helping meet that business need, that thing that the business decide? If it's increased growth, that might look different than increased revenue.
Mm-hmm.
If it's increased market share, that looks different than something else, right? So what your business cares about is something that I think should be something every designer on the software team, regardless of their level, is thinking about, or at least aware of at the very least. And to me, when you've got those stakeholders that are pushing back because they don't see the value, if you come in and you're like, well, the business cares about blah, 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 and this thing isn't doing something, and you're tying it directly to that business metric, not the software metric, but the business metric, you now look like you know what you're talking about, and it's going to be very hard to dismiss you as, oh, the little artsy designer, go play with your crayons, and we'll let you know when we have a feature ready to go make pretty.
Right.
And I think that's something really important is tying, that it's kind of like you mentioned this, I'm calling it out, but like this idea of like making sure that those metrics and stuff that you're understanding what the business cares about. And that's something I feel like a lot of designers, they just think, I'm just there to make it pretty.
100%.
And that's cool if that's going to be your job. But, if you want to be taken more seriously, I think you got to start thinking about those things. And in this case, when it comes to UX audit, tying that back together is going to make you, it's going to make your opinion that much more valid, I think, especially when you get the pushback.
And I'm not saying I'm the strongest, I have the strongest business acumen, right? I am listening. I heard you say this is important and this isn't here.
Yeah,
right?
that's another good point too.
Because sometimes we can get intimidated as well of like, listen, I'm a UX expert. This is where I've dedicated my time and my expertise in, learning and knowing this. It's just as important as what you know. Now we have to kind of come together and say like, okay, I heard you say this. A lot like user interviews, which is a part of the process of like, if this is important to you, I'm going to make sure it happens, but it's not happening right now.
So at the end of this, when you're selling this to somebody, a stakeholder, somebody, maybe they're more receptive, but what's the benefit of doing these? When you're done the audit, end of day outcome, we've completed the audit. Who benefits from that report out at the end of the day?
Right. It helps, again, teams to understand where they are and where they need to go. How does that fit within your roadmap? What work kind of gets pushed to the top now and it becomes more important because it's critical to the success of whatever goals that you've set out for the quarter, the year, what have you. It also helps with your development team, right? If we've uncovered a lot of duplicate patterns, right? You're using 3 different, progress bars within your system. Can we eliminate some of these and start to systematize things in a way that now you can work at a higher velocity because, your team isn't having to redesign the same component, develop the same component. You have more of a streamlined process and you have a better understanding of your users, right? A lot of places don't have the time to sit down and talk to users, talk to customers. You're walking away from a UX audit understanding your user a lot better, understanding how they actually use your software, which, not a lot of places invest in that type of research.
Okay, so I'm going to talk a little bit about the methods and the tools and stuff that you use when you do these audits. You mentioned just a second ago talking to users. Is that something that you make as part of your standard process when you come in and do an audit, or when I'm hoping that an internal team understands their users. I'm hoping that you've got more than just a couple random persona cards that people reference and, hopefully those are based on real data, real people, real users. But I'm curious, is that something that you try to do as part of an audit, or is it mostly desk type research where you're secondary research where you're looking up things that people have already kind of uncovered, or do you do some of that primary research, talking to users and interviews, things like that?
Yeah, it depends on the length of the audit, right? The famous UX answer to everything. It depends. Depends on the length of the audit, right? If we are been tasked for kind of like 1 week, come in, take a look at things. We're very clear on what the problem is. Can you come in and take a look? Sometimes we're looking at that secondary research and by establishing patterns, coming in as a fresh set of eyes. With a little bit more time, conducting some unmoderated user tests. So giving folks a task and asking them to go complete it. And then we're having them, screen record. We like User Brain for that. But there are different tools out there. Pick your poison. And then showing that to folks, that has a greater impact on the decision-making process. And it helps, again, get that buy-in. Because it's not just me and my opinion, you and your opinion. It's just like, okay, we've brought in 10 people to add this thing to a cart and they just can't. So now we have a baseline for establishing the next part of like, okay, let's see based on some heuristics, some principles, why that might not be happening and how we can fix it.
So it's interesting because I guess, again, it totally depends on the time that you have.
Right.
But if in theory, if you're an internal team and you're not an outside consultant coming in that's been hired to do an audit, let's assume you're an internal team, you should have this data already. You should be doing usability studies. You should be measuring and tracking and testing all of your designs to make sure that they are correct and they're optimized and all that stuff. But if you're not, it's, again, I think this is just one of these one of those bits of data points that you should have before you make a decision about what to do, what to change. Obviously, coming in and just simply doing, I don't know what you might call a visual audit, just kind of scrolling through. I guess heuristic evaluation, would be some of this. Heuristic evaluation is based on heuristics, which are sort of standards, the way we think most people function and things like that.
Right.
But that's an average, right? It's not necessarily the way your very specific user, especially in enterprise, where you've got, if you're, enterprise very specific users who may have been trained, who may have 50 years of experience or something like that.
Yeah.
Your users are not going to be like the general public necessarily. Not to say we want to design bad software for enterprise. That hurts my heart a little bit. But, that is the case, taking those things into account. You mentioned heuristics. Let's talk a little bit about heuristics, because this is an interesting thing. I think a lot of people will hear a heuristic evaluation. I want to talk about the difference between a heuristic evaluation and an audit.
Heuristics are, to me, the principles for conducting an audit, right? An audit is, in my opinion, more holistic. It involves, like we mentioned, talking to stakeholders, conducting some usability tests or customer interviews, making sure there's alignment there. And then taking these, like you said, general principles, general guidelines that have been established of how do humans interact with their computers, and then taking that and kind of measuring how close or how far we are to these established guidelines, right? And ultimately, it's a yardstick. It helps keep us in check of how close or how far are we to getting to the thing that we want? And taking away my opinion and your opinion of just saying, these are the standards, you're either doing them or you're not. With the grain of salt, like you mentioned, that every user is not the average user, right? And that's part of one of those, at least in Nielsen's 10 heuristics, of just understanding that we have to make accommodations for those power users and keep in mind those new users. So yeah, I mentioned Nielsen's 10 heuristics. There's a few of them out there. There's a lot of overlap in kind of how we understand how people use computers, essentially is how I talk about heuristics. They're just kind of grouped differently. So ultimately, as long as you're using some sort of measuring stick for success or failure on how things are happening, I think that's what's important.
I was going to ask you, but you called it out. So there's obviously many heuristic frameworks. Nielsen Norman Group may be the most popular simply because they have probably the biggest social media presence. They have the most interns writing posts on LinkedIn and everywhere else. So they're probably the most common that people would hear of. But they're not the only one. I think that's worth calling out. Do you have a favorite that you prefer? You mentioned Nielsen. Do you use Nielsen Norman Group's heuristic framework, or do you have another that you like better? Or what are your thoughts? Maybe you've created your own. I don't know.
I mean, there's lots of checklists out there that are based on those principles. So we do have a checklist. If anyone's interested, it's on Headway, but it's kind of based on a lot of those kind of best practices. Nielsen is one. Schneiderman's 8 Golden Rules, I believe, is another one. Yeah, they all kind of follow the same kind of idea. There's no one that I would say is better than the other. They're all just kind of grouped differently. And they provide a good language for us to understand or to communicate back to our stakeholders why things aren't working. And it's not just, there's not enough contrast, right? That's sometimes the thing. Our text is too small. It gives us more of a language, common language that we can understand. I think they've all got their merit.
Cool. Yeah. So, one of the things I'm just thinking in my head, but using these frameworks, I don't know. One is that maybe each has their own pros and cons. I don't really know a lot about the various heuristic frameworks, to be honest, other than the fact that there are many. But it's one of those things where I would imagine there's a bit of social proof bias in there too, where you say, this is the popular one and then everyone uses this one. And, everybody else, you'd be crazy not to use it if, everyone else does it. And I imagine it's probably easier to get a little bit of buy-in from people who are pushing back if you're using the most popular framework, versus I made my own, and I'm the only one who uses it.
Right.
That's something just thinking about, as, again, internal teams who are trying to do this, pick one. I don't know if you have just pick one. It's better than nothing.
You got to start somewhere, right? If you have a low UX maturity, like you said, Nielsen Norman, his principles are everywhere, right? They're very easily accessible. Some of them you have to do a little bit deeper to kind of uncover and learn about. But start somewhere and then follow that rabbit hole and find the ones that, bring that value to your audit.
So doing the audits, let's talk a little bit about doing the audits. It's one of those things where I imagine as an internal team, you probably want to have some framework ready, something that you can follow, because in theory, this should not be something you do once. It should be something you're repeating often, having that kind of a framework, having that sort of checklist of things to do. Tell me a little bit about like your favorite kind of list. We don't have to get too deep into it, but I'd love to hear sort of like how you do it. What's the process? What's the method at a very high level? And sort of help everybody listening out there. Maybe there's some, resources or something available that you can talk about where people can go to find it. But I want to talk a little bit about that. And then after we do that, I want to talk about some of that metric stuff again. We had the metrics in the beginning. It's like a metric sandwich, the before and the after and the work in the between. Tell me a little bit about that process.
Yeah, sure. I mean, first of all, you should identify, is this we don't want to look at standalone screens, right? We want to look at holistically, what is our process? What tasks are we looking for the user to complete? My process is very basic. I take a lot of screenshots of interfaces. I bring them into Figma. And then we have kind of a ranking system for things. So it's either good, it needs improvement, it needs to be fixed, or like, hey, there's an idea here. And we kind of have these different tags for things and kind of start from the top of the screen, moving all the way down and just identifying with that task in mind, like how close am I to actually completing that task? Is it clear where I need to click in order to go to my next screen? Are things getting cut off? Just going through those best practices. And then screenshots are still, so it's a lot of clicking on my actual interface and making sure that interactivity is there too, and then that's captured, right? Is there a hover state whenever it's clickable? And if things are a button, are they consistent all throughout the system? Is that something that I'm noticing? Those are kind of like the big red flags that you'll notice. And oftentimes we know this, right? As we're designing things out, as we're, in a meeting, we're like, oh gosh, this thing on this page, it bugs me to death. But we don't have a system for actually cataloging that and categorizing that. So this is your opportunity of just finally putting that little virtual Post-it and saying, this thing that I've talked about forever, it's bad. It needs to be fixed.
And that's a good opportunity too. Like you mentioned before, it's not about I like it, I don't. It's effective. It's not, objectively, why is it broken? And objectively, what can we do to fix it? Versus it just bugs me, which in the meeting, as UX and I see this, like, oh my God, it drives me crazy. But this is a good opportunity for you to like list out the why, like what is wrong with it and why is it objectively broken?
Right.
And I think that's a really great call out. You mentioned that before. I just want to tie that back there. Because this is not just like I like it, I don't, right? It's objective, fact-driven, reason-driven, research-driven. Less about, I don't like blue. I wish we'd stop using blue. Maybe we can use pink or some other color.
Right. I mean, it's a great time to systematize things, right? If it's like, oh man, we have 8 different shades of the same blue everywhere, right? This is a load that's been put on the design team that they have to kind of keep track of. The development team has to keep track of. This is an opportunity for us to kind of pare down some colors. Is there too many colors happening? Again, is that distracting the user from actually completing the task, from gaining trust with us, right? Because sometimes that's another metric of just like, if your branding is off, that seems like the pretty picture, but what you're doing is like taking away trust from the user. So those things, it's your opportunity to catalog.
All right, so let's talk a little bit about metrics on the tail end of this. So we've measured in the beginning, we've got metrics set up, so we know something's broken. What kind of metrics do you use at the end? Do you try to use the same metrics to say, look, we were doing this poorly before, same exact metric after has improved? Do you have new metrics? Do you set up new metrics? What are your thoughts about like measuring all this work that you've been doing to make sure that it's actually, value-added work and not a total waste of time?
Right. I mean, setting up the metrics in the beginning is mainly to help prioritize what's going to happen next. Because ultimately, the report is kind of standalone. Now it's up to either your internal team or whoever you're consulting with to decide, right? We've identified these 100 things. Where do we go from here? Now that you've established, like, this was the problem, this is the needle that we want to move, maybe we prioritize, this thing that we needed um, in order to get us to that goal that we talked about earlier on. And that's how you get buy-in for the things that you want to actually happen. And sometimes it's low-hanging fruit, right? It might be something as simple as like, we need to systematize our buttons, right? We have too many different colored buttons. They don't mean anything. This is impacting the users and slowing down our development team. And we really, we need to improve click-through rates. That's the story, right? So that it frees up everyone's time and it helps us get to the goal that we want. So mainly the idea of setting up those metrics help prioritize what happens after an audit and to measure the effectiveness of the audit of like, hey, we identified this as a problem. It actually was a problem and we fixed it.
So you just mentioned the word storytelling, which I think is something that, or narrative. I can't remember exactly what you said. It was something about,
I think
you said storytelling. Yeah, something like that. But I'm curious, like when you go and present this, generally speaking, you've probably had experience doing this many times. Have you found a way to sell this to different teams in the most effective way? I imagine just presenting a bunch of data and being like, this is all the data. That's not going to necessarily change anybody's mind. And you mentioned storytelling, so I'm assuming you use like a narrative kind of way to tell the story. How do you present all this? Because it's probably very overwhelming. It's probably a lot of stuff. How do you get it down to a digestible 15-minute, 20-minute presentation so that it doesn't go over all these stakeholders' heads, who most of the time are probably not UX people, because the UX people in the room are probably like, yes, for the love of God, we know to fix these things, but you're trying to sell this to somebody who's not a designer, not on the UX team. What's an effective way to sell it? How do you do it? How do you get this so that it doesn't just like make their eyes glaze over and they kind of, ignore everything you say?
I mean, hopefully the last meeting, right, where we're presenting the report isn't your first time talking to these stakeholders. I think an important thing is to bring them along within the process. That way you have time to answer all these questions. Like they've been along for the ride. They've helped kind of shape the narrative. So that's kind of how you get that buy-in from them. It's just like, listen, I've just been putting the pieces together, right? I've just been the scribe. Essentially, you've been telling me the story. Your users have been telling me the story, and like, here's the end result, right? Here are all the notes. And now, I can help you organize this. I can help you decide what to do first, what's important, what we can wait on, based on my understanding of your business and what your resources look like. But yeah, I think that's important, is to make sure that I'm not the one telling the story. Like they've told me the story and now I'm just kind of presenting it back to them.
Yeah, I think that's a really great point, though, bringing them along with you. And this is something I say a lot with, regardless of the work you're doing as a UX designer, UX professional, whether you're a researcher, designer, copywriter, doesn't matter. Bring the team along with you and let them see the work you're doing so they don't think it's just, oh, you go off in a room and do blah, 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 and like, make things pretty or ask questions, whatever it is you do as your job as a UX professional. Take them along with you. This is a really great opportunity, and they can see, because some people might not realize, like if the director of engineering doesn't realize that you've used 5 different components and the teams have built 5 different components that do the exact same thing, there's clearly waste there.
Right.
Aside from the experience of the user, the people using the tool, engineers are repeating work that someone else has already done, and that alone is a waste. So there's an opportunity there. So I think bringing them along, that's a really great shout out. That's a really great call out, because I think we often do this. We just kind of, leave me alone. I want to go do my work. I'll let you know when I'm done. But, especially when you've got a team with relatively low maturity that might not trust the UX team to do the work, to do the things that they need, that's a really great opportunity. And then it makes your job a lot easier at the end. You mentioned, like, this is not the first time you're talking to them. So you shouldn't have that hard of a time. This isn't the first time you're coming in and meeting with the CEO, for instance, and trying to pitch them an idea. someone's already brought a team in from externally, and a consultant maybe, or someone's given the team the green light to go take a week or two to do this because, someone said do this versus some other work you could have done. So this is that's a really great call out. And I think we often tend to want to go off in our corner, do our thing. This is a really great example. Don't do that.
Yeah. And I love that you mentioned your UX folks in the room are probably cheering you on. And I've found that a lot of times coming in as a consultant that the UX folks on your team or the design team, they know what's up, right? They know what's happening. So I like to make it my mission for them to feel empowered, because it's easy to be the outside voice and stakeholders say, Melissa said this as the consultant.
Yeah.
We got to listen to them. But it's like you need to listen to your folks as well, and kind of giving them as well the tools of, okay, this is the process. This is how you speak to get the things that you need done. And then I can kind of disappear and they take ownership of.
Just take a step back, you just walk back.
Yeah.
I'm done,
And then things are working.
Yeah. Seriously. What's that bias? There's a bias for the outside expert comes in and swoops. What is that? I don't know. There's probably I'm sure there's a term for that. But I've actually talked with other consultants, like software consultants, a lot of agile consultants and things like that. And they'll say often they come in, the first thing they do is talk to the team because the team knows exactly what's wrong. And it's the only reason anything changes afterwards is because this expert came in and did a thing. And I feel like that's kind of one of the problems with maybe one of the benefits of hiring an outside team to do this, assuming someone values it enough to pay to sign the check. But that team, the outside team, is often trusted for our many cognitive biases that humans kind of tend to have. They trust those outside teams more because they're the expert.
Right.
They do this all the time. So, anyway, if you can bring that outside team in, if you can afford it, there's a benefit there, I think, especially with the stakeholders who might be hesitant to listen to the team, But yeah, it's sad that that's the case, but that is often the case.
Right. And I think that's what we love to do at Headway, is just to plug into the team, right? Is not to help that team feel empowered, right? We are a part of this. We are, we're coming in from the outside. We have that fresh perspective, but ultimately we're doing this with you, not for you. And, we want to make sure that if this is the end of our engagement, that you have the tools to be successful and that the people who are on the team are empowered to continue on with the success of the business.
Well, when you mentioned Headway, I want to talk a little bit about Headway, and just to clarify, anybody listening, Headway did not pay to come on. This is not a paid. Maybe we could talk after. We'll say I'll send you an invoice. No, I'm kidding. But yeah, this is not paid. Obviously, this is not meant to be like a sales pitch for Headway. But I'm curious. You guys have done this for a while. I'm curious, what kind of sets your process apart? Is it just that you've done it so many times it's become sort of second nature, you got it down to a science, but what kind of, when you come in Headway, what do you guys do that might be different than what other teams may be doing?
Yeah, I mean, we kind of touched on that already. Our biggest thing, again, is bringing stakeholders along for the process, having daily stand-ups, daily touch points with folks on our learnings, our understanding. I think that's really important. Also, it's being able to plug into a team and come away feeling like the team has been empowered and taking the time to even teach some of these skill sets. You mentioned some teams might have low UX maturity, and it's just a matter of taking the time to actually okay, let's train our team. Let's understand what they need to be successful. And I think that's kind of what sets us apart.
So you mentioned Headway. Do you guys have any resources online? You mentioned some free stuff. Any resources or a URL or something you can give out that we can go check out, all that stuff?
Yeah, so you can head on over to headway.io. Under our resources tab, you'll kind of find our UX audit checklist, some blog articles that's been written by the team on how to conduct UX audits, some best practices. We're also on YouTube, so you can check Headway on YouTube, and we have some great workshops there from our head of design, Billy Sweetman, who walks us through kind of our process here.
Yeah. So what's on YouTube? That's the video stuff. Is it showing examples of audits or showing examples of report out? You mentioned there was a report out on your site.
Yeah, we have some examples on there. I know we definitely go through the process and kind of go over some of the things that I talked about here of just why it's important, how to conduct an audit, things like that.
I have some questions that I want to ask you in a few minutes, but before we do that, any closing thoughts that you have that we didn't get a chance to talk about you think is important for any of those designers out there to hear?
Yeah, I mean, audits don't have to be this big scary thing. You can do them really quickly, within the time frame that you have if you make time. Whenever you get a new project or a new request to change something, maybe as part of your process, take a minute and evaluate it first.
Any other resources or anything you want to call out that you think would be valuable for people out there to know about?
Yeah. Oh, this is my new favorite book, Articulating Design Decisions.
Ooh, I love that.
This is a great book. I got
my copy. Oh, I got my copy right here.
Yes.
I got the first edition.
Look at that.
I got the first edition. Actually, you mentioned Articulating Design Decisions. I got Tom's coming on the show. He's going to be when this is released, he'll already have been on.
Oh, I'm so jealous. Yeah. But I think that's
Tom's
a great tool for just kind of documenting your decisions. A lot of UX audits is about that documentation process, and it's not about the, moving pixels on a screen or some of those other skills. This is a skill that I feel like, it's underdeveloped within designers. So kind of having that as a resource of just like, how do I write things down? How do I, bring stakeholders along and document all that?
I love it. Yeah. Tom's book. It's funny. I actually, I recommend Tom's book to like almost everybody that I talk to when they give me a design book. It's like one of the first books I recommend.
Yeah.
And somebody online was like recently, hey, I want some good design books that aren't Tom Graver's Articulate. It's like, you don't need to tell me about Tom. Know about Tom, but give me like another book. So I made some memes. Some memes that we can use. I'll send you the memes. You can have the memes and you can feel free to share them. But Tom's like, you're embarrassing me. Would you please stop? Anyway. All right, cool. Well, that's awesome. So headway.io, check it out. A lot of great stuff out there. Melissa, I got some questions to ask you to help all of our listeners get to know our guests a little bit better. You got some time to stick around to answer some silly questions that are completely unrelated to UX audits.
For you, Jeremy, yes.
Only for me. All right. I love it. All right. First up, what is your favorite non-design book?
Oh, man. Such a good question. I would say Emma by Jane Austen. I really love.
Oh, classic. All right.
I love Jane.
I love it.
We're on a first name basis.
Yeah, Jane. Yeah. That's awesome. Is she? Yeah. When did she die? When did she die? That was like 1800s.
Yeah.
She's dead. She's been gone.
She's gone.
We speak, we communicate.
That's right.
Posthumously. All right. What is your favorite non-design podcast?
Ooh, I'm trying to think. I used to listen to podcasts a lot while I worked. And then when doing UX audits, having to write a lot, I've had to be like, okay, I can't hear other people's voices.
I know. Yeah.
I'm writing. But I would have to say recently I've been listening to Terrible Thanks for Asking, which is a kind of like lifestyle podcast. Yeah, I really like that one.
Is that NPR? Is that NPR? Is that NPR? One of the NPR people?
I'm not sure.
No?
I don't know.
Okay. Anyway, for some reason, maybe I just
it gives NPR vibes for sure, though.
Yeah, it's got NPR vibes. Yeah, I love it. Yeah. I can't listen to anything with words. Well, music I can listen to with words, but yeah, like I try to listen to audiobooks and stuff. That doesn't work when I'm working. I have to listen. Recently, I've been on a lo-fi beats kick.
Oh, me too.
It sounds like I'm like in like a fancy New York hotel lobby or something.
Nice. Yeah. And then I've reserved those, the audiobooks and the podcast for when I'm sitting quietly in a room. And I'm like, that's kind of the anti.
That's what I listen to when I do the dishes. That's my thing. I do take the time to do that after we eat dinner. All right. What is your favorite meal?
Oh, so do you mean like breakfast, lunch, or dinner, or like the actual food?
Yeah, your favorite thing that you've eaten. So it could be something you've cooked, something you've had on a trip somewhere, something your grandma used to cook, whatever.
Yeah.
Favorite meal you've eaten. Yeah, that's a good call out. I like lunch.
I was gonna say, is that it? I really love, this is very weird. I don't know if it's weird or not, but I love omelets. So like breakfast places, I love going to breakfast. I don't like making my own breakfast, but I do love going to breakfast and just getting a very delicious omelet with all the fixins in it.
Right on. Yeah, I like a good breakfast too.
Yeah.
I get whenever I go, I'll do an omelet as well, and I get it like loaded with like literally everything. It's just like a tiny little layer of egg, and then like I don't know all the stuff inside of it.
Yeah,
I'm a big. I like a breakfast. I like to do breakfast for dinner. Breakfast for dinner is the way to go. My kids like that too.
Yeah, I had cereal the other night, and it was what I needed.
All right, what's your favorite vacation spot?
Ooh. Well, my husband's family has a house in Cape Cod, so we go there a lot. Cape Cod, Massachusetts. Yeah.
I'm jealous. I've actually never been to Cape Cod, but they always make it out to be very, very fancy and very, very nice on the movies, on the TV and stuff.
It's very nice. Yes. Recommend.
Never been. I have to go at some point. Yeah, we just moved from New Orleans up to Cincinnati area. So we're not close, but relatively closer than we were from New Orleans. So maybe at one point we've just been going to Michigan. We found Michigan beaches recently. That's been fun.
Nice.
So yeah. Anyway, all right, cool. What is your favorite design tool that is not Figma?
I'm gonna have to go analog here, just like pencil and paper. I think
pencil and paper.
Yeah.
I love that. I actually, I talked to Julia Dabari recently too, and this is something she said, is like, if you can do it on pencil and paper, you can do it anywhere. So, like screw your design tools. You can do it in pen and paper. You could do it on any tool. Doesn't matter the tool as long as you can do it analog first. So I love that. Cool. All right. Well, Melissa, that's it. That's everything that we've got today. I really appreciate you coming on. Before we get out of here, one more plug. Let us know where we can find you. Find Headway, all that stuff before we get out of here.
Yeah, you can find Headway, headway.io. We're also on LinkedIn. And yeah, you can find me on LinkedIn too.
Cool. Are you like posting about stuff regularly, or do you post as Headway? Is that you when you post Headway?
I am Headway. No. No, I'm happy to connect with anyone on LinkedIn. I don't really post that much, but if you DM me and have any questions,
right on.
I'm happy to answer.
Well, if we got any questions, find Melissa. She'll answer all your burning. You might want to watch out. You might get a lot of messages.
Yeah.
Maybe don't say
Maybe
that.
not.
Yeah, just
maybe not.
Send a connection request with a message. Don't just send the cold connection request. We talk about that all the time on the show. Cool. Yeah. All right, Melissa. Well, it's been awesome having you. I learned quite a bit. Thank you so much for coming on. This has been great.
All righty. Thanks, Jeremy. Bye.
Well, all right, y'all. That is it for me and Melissa for today. I hope we helped shed a little bit of light on UX audits, what they are. Hopefully try to, make them not so scary. Remember, use the data, make it repeatable, bring your team along, make sure that your team sees this and sees the things that you're pulling in, all the crap that you're finding. Make sure that they are a part of this so that when you present this work to them later, it isn't the first time they're seeing it. Use that opportunity to systematize everything. Try to, build some momentum for your design system if you can. Build some way for reusable components, all that stuff so that your team is sharing and not doing that double work. Head on over to Headway.io. Check out all those resources. They got some Figma templates there for the report out. That's going to be pretty awesome. Let me know, has anybody out there done UX audits before? Is that something that you've been doing? Have you had any success, any roadblocks that you've run into? I'd love to know what's been going on with that. Let me know what you think on LinkedIn or shoot me an email at hello@beyonduxdesign.com. I would love to hear from you. And if you like what you heard today, don't forget to subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts. If you feel like you're getting something out of the show, I would love it if you left a 5-star review. That would help me out so much more than you can imagine. And if you know somebody who might find any of this stuff useful, then why don't you tell them about it? That would be fantastic. One more shout out to Zoe for leaving some fantastic feedback for the Beyond UX Design book. Don't forget, if you pick up the book from beyonduxdesign.com/book and you leave me some honest feedback, you'll get a chance to win a shout on the show just like this, a badass holographic Beyond UX Design sticker, a free book, or even a chance to have a one-on-one with me. So head on over to beyonduxdesign.com/book and pre-order your copy today. If you want to help keep the show independent and ad-free, check out all those Patreon sponsorship packages at beyonduxdesign.com/support. You can join Chris, Siraquan, Stacy, Radu, Megan, Andrew, John, Mark, and Kevin, and a bunch of others by supporting the show for as little as $3 a month. And there's some awesome perks like that badass holographic Beyond UX Design sticker. You can get a shout on the show every week. There's even a package to meet with me for 30 minutes every month. Don't forget to head on over to beyonduxdesign.com/audible trial to download Thinking Fast and Slow by Daniel Kahneman. Sign up for a free 30-day Audible trial, cancel anytime, and the book is yours to keep forever. And in case you forgot, I partner with audible.com, so anytime you sign up for a free trial, you'll help support the show. There's no obligation. You can cancel anytime, and the audiobook is yours to keep forever. So get a free audiobook on me and help support the show. If you're looking for a UX course that's as unique as you are, do yourself a favor, check out Mento Design Academy. Head on over to beyonduxdesign.com/Mento and use the promo code BeyondUX200 to get $200 off the course. So join Mento and let your passions lead your learning journey. Remember to sign up for the newsletter, check out all the past episodes along with all the show notes at beyonduxdesign.com. I hope you keep coming back for more great UX tips from Beyond UX Design. And until next time, remember, you're more than a designer because there's more to UX and design. I'll see you around. Take care, y'all. I just had a thought. I'm going to edit this out. God, I just had a thought that popped into my head. Probably in a second, I'm going to be like, oh, yeah, I remember. What was I going to say? No, I remember what it was.